Welcome to the new revamped Move IQ podcast where we talk all things property. Now, this week we're going to be talking about
renovating.
Yes.
Getting your hands dirty, getting stuck into a project. We've called this before the dust settles. So lots of tips and I guess conversations about our own renovations and what we've experienced. Yeah, hopefully some tips along the way.
Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't have a creative eye.
Oh, I'm trusting.
I'm not very good at seeing a room and visualizing how I want it to look. So for me, I'm very good at asking other people's opinions and just kind of come around and look at my living room and what would you do with it?
I like that. That's always nice. And I always think that that's always a good question to ask anyone that's popping around to your house because you just don't know what other people see, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're so stuck in your own way that actually having a fresh pair of eyes tell you how they would style a room is really useful because people think of things that you've never thought of, right?
Exactly that. But I also find that the whole renovation thing is actually quite a stressful situation to be in because it's really hard to visualize how it's going to look. So at the moment we're at a stage of putting in a media wall.
Nice.
So we've got like a normal fireplace with no fire in it at the moment, but we've now bought like a long electric fire that literally arrived yesterday. Very exciting.
Very exciting.
It's got like a fake crackle and everything. Like, it's amazing. So we've got that, and then we're going to put the telly on the wall up there, and then either side there'll be like shelves with like underlighting and things, which my husband mostly designed because he's got quite a good eye, and we also asked ChatGPT.
Yes,
to help put the whole thing together.
ChatGPT basically can take the all the credit for my new renovation. The amount of stuff I put in there. But also what I found it most useful for was, okay, great, the designing part of it.
Yeah.
I feel like you have to be quite good with your prompts, right? Because that's where I wasn't very good. I'd kind of upload a picture and just be like, I did one this morning, for example. Yeah, healthy. And it's like, oh, what kind of vibe would you like this room to be? And I went for tropical, which probably was the worst prompt ever because in my head, I was like Bali vibes, nice creams and sand colours, but it went for tropical vibes. So it gave me like a teal wall and loads of green around. And I was like, oh, this isn't this was not the look we were going for. So I feel like prompts are key when you're doing anything on any AI system, putting those in. When you were saying about you don't feel that you've got that kind of creativity to be able to turn a room into something else. That's my strong point. So I love that bit. I would love to.
Come and help me.
Great. Let's make a day of it. Because I look at a lot of properties as an investment point of view. So as well as renovating my own home, sometimes we will be doing flip projects or doing something to hold and rent out. So for me, it's always about adding value so that I can pull money out of the deal at some point. And by adding value, what are you doing? You're either adding space or you're adding extra rooms. Most of the time, I don't want to go and add space because that's going to require me getting planning and doing an extension. I want a quick turnaround, which means that you're buying a space and reconfiguring it. So, for example, you turn a 1-bed into a 2-bed by just moving some internal walls. That is my bread and butter, and that's what I love doing. And
that's a skill.
It is a skill, and a lot of it comes into floor plans. And you can get tools nowadays where you can put your phone over a floor plan and move stuff around on your phone. It's brilliant, and I think that's so helpful. And I think that stems from, no joke, when I was a kid, my mum and dad used to take me to like open homes on a Sunday of like new build developments, and I'd sit there and draw the floor plans.
Was it a bit like, did you ever play The Sims growing up?
Yes. Oh my God, I was obsessed with The Sims.
So for me, when I played The Sims growing up, I just ended up just making my own house because I had no skill to create a whole new design. I would just go, I'm just going to make my own house because I don't know what I'm doing. That's how, and then you were probably creating amazing things. But like when it comes to renovating, I mean, for people do it for different reasons. So for some people, you might be buying to then flip it to then resell. But then for a lot of people, it's trying to revamp a house that you've lived in for a long time just to kind of give it a different energy, that kind of thing, or potentially put some money on the house when you eventually want to sell it.
Yeah, or extending, like, when you weigh up the cost of moving somewhere else because you've grown out of a home that you're living in versus doing work on it, you've got to look at those two different figures. And a lot of the time, actually, it might be worth investing some money into your own property and extending it rather than going and starting that whole process again, particularly if you're in somewhere that you really love and you don't want to move, what work can you do to it? So there's loads of reasons why people might want to renovate. And particularly if you've lived in something for a long time, it's not necessarily a full renovation where you want to go do an extension out the back, but it's doing those internals. It's like a light refurb. So my property that we've just bought started off as a light refurb. So we bought something. It's funny, isn't it? Because we knew exactly where we wanted to be, and it was just about waiting for the right property to come up. So we actually bought something that was livable, so we could have moved into it like that. It was, renovated maybe 5 years ago, but it just wasn't our style. So I knew whatever property we were buying, we were going to have to spend X amount of money on it, because we wanted to completely change the style of it to something that suited us. So styles change, trends change, and actually it might not be a full renovation, but you just want to change up the style and the feel of the place that you're living in.
Well, here's the thing, right? So you would want to revamp to make it into your own style, but then what would then happen if you then wanted to resell it? Because, I mean, we said in another podcast, you enjoy moving house every 2 years because you're crazy. So what would then happen if you've then done up that house to put it into your style? Would that then affect you being able to sell the house?
Well, potentially, I guess, because people have very different tastes.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, with our property at the minute, we've put in things like micro cement, line wash walls, and that's not everyone's cup of tea.
What's micro cement?
So micro cement it's a flooring. It's kind of like polished concrete, but it's a 6-layer process, and it ends up being about 2 millimeters thick. And but it gives you one surface. So instead of having tiles or where you've got a grout in between, it's all one layer. And I personally love the look of it. You see it very often.
Cold on your feet.
We've got underfloor heating under it.
Course
which was a whole nother story.
So
and it's things like thinking about that. Because actually, I've got a very quick story about the whole micro cement, because the floor build up level is very important if you're doing a full top to toe renovation, and you are, you get to this point where you're like, okay, we're now taking the flooring up, so we might as well go ahead and put in underfloor heating. And that's why it's so important to have a bit of an additional budget in the back of your mind, because once you start pulling walls down and going back to brick, you don't know what you're going to find. We found quite a lot. In fact, on the print, like the plans that we had of this property, where there was a bathroom downstairs, we actually thought, okay, we actually want to move that bathroom and move the wall back and just kind of push back the garage, push back this bathroom to create a bigger space. But actually, when we got to that wall on our plans, it looked like you could just move that wall, but it was a structural wall. So we couldn't move this wall, which threw out all our plans, which meant we then had to move the bathroom completely to another space to allow for the space that we wanted in the garage. And that meant we had to replumb and connect new pipes. Then when we found out what the pipes were looking like, our plumber said, actually, whilst you're doing this, you might as well replace all the pipes on that level. Then when we got to our ensuite upstairs, we were like, they had this lovely giant, what are those, copper baths, which I thought looks great, but actually I'm probably not good at, I wouldn't use it. I like a shower.
I'm such a bath.
Well, I sold it on Facebook Marketplace, and I had people fighting over this copper bath. I didn't know how in demand they were, but so I sold this copper bath. And then I realised why they only had a bath upstairs, because the pressure through the pipes was actually not enough to have a shower upstairs. So then we had to replace the pipes all the way upstairs. So it's all these things that you don't plan for.
Hold on. Because now I need to know how far you went over budget.
I've actually stopped looking. I've stopped counting probably 4 weeks ago. But ask me in about 4 weeks' time and I will do a full breakdown, because I think it's really useful to know numbers. And honestly, I've just stopped adding it up because it makes me want to cry. But that's why you need a contingency. In all honesty, I normally put aside minimum 10% as a contingency plan. In this case, I think I'm going to be looking at nearer 30%. And I do. And that's why people get into struggle. And we were in a situation where actually that was okay. We had income coming in from other properties, from other things that we're flipping. But then you've got to allocate other money into that project. That's why you see so many unfinished renovations. Because it's so easy to run out of money. And I think that is where you have to start making decisions. You know, we didn't have to go in and put all the pipe work going all the way upstairs. You could have gone, well, I can't have a shower up there, full stop. We're just going to have to replace it with a bath. So I think that's where you really do have to think about what is important, what am I going to get rid of and can live without, but what do I really want to put the money into doing? And I think if you've got a good team on site, so we have a construction company as well, so it's all the people that are working for us and we trust them, and it's so important to find a good build team. Where do you find a good build team? That is a tricky one. And I think it's always from other people's word of mouth and having a recommendation from someone, from anyone doing any bit of work. And I always think 3 quotes, it's standard when you're doing anything. 3 quotes and comparing those prices, because sometimes people can be way off. There's just, I mean, I could talk about this forever because there's so many different ways of actually employing someone to do the works as well, because you can have something called cost plus, which is how we work with our guys, but we trust them. We've been doing a lot of work with them over the years. So cost plus is where you basically are reimbursing your contractors or your builders plus a percentage. So that percentage is kind of their profit margin and their overheads, but the costs that you're paying them is literally for the materials and their labour. So it's a good way of working in terms of it's quite transparent, it's quite flexible. So for us, when we didn't necessarily have a set budget that we want to do this work within, and we're paying for things as they go, and we pay them every 2 weeks. So we're never putting loads of money down up front.
That's a good
We pay them, they invoice us every 2 weeks. We look at the work. It's also that's one way of doing it. And then, or a lot of people will do like a fixed rate. So basically, or a fixed price. So that will be where someone will come round, look at your project and go, okay, you want to do this, this and this. This is what it's going to cost you, fixed price, which is great if you're trying to budget, because you know exactly what you're going to be paying for those works. But
that's when you can go over.
Well, that's where
see it on TV all the
time. Well, that's it. And then you've blown your budget. If you've got more money to spend, then you are constantly having to top up. But then at the same time, you might find, if you don't know your builders that well, they're like, great, okay, I've got this fixed amount of money. Now I'm going to see how cheaply I can actually do this for, so that they can take more of a profit. So,
I didn't know that.
There's pros and cons to which way it works. I personally do the cost plus, but that's because I know my build team really well. And it gave me the flexibility to be able to make changes along the way. So it's always thinking about things like that. There's also something called a JCT, not to get too technical, but that's a really good contract to have with builders. So for example, you can then put in, if you don't get this done on time, we're charging you X amount percentage. Which is just keeps people on track. And that's it's quite a common thing in the industry, and you can download a template online, and it's called a JCT. So always good to have one of those, because it just keeps everyone on the same page, and it's a contractual agreement. Another thing is, like I said before, not paying people up front all the time. I always hold back 10%. And sometimes I've been doing a big development project. I will, once it's finished and we've gone round and we've done snagging, I'll pay 5%, and then I hold on to the other 5% for 12 months. So there's but that will all be in my JCT at the beginning, so everyone knows where they stand and there's no surprises.
That's a really good idea. But also, I mean, you're saying that you're doing up your place at the moment. So while you're doing up big things, so while you were doing your cement thing going on.
The micro cement.
So while you were doing that, were you living in the house or did you move out?
No. So this was a very different project than we normally do. So I've spent the last maybe 10 years of my life living on building sites and doing work around properties. But then I've never, and it's very stressful, and you never feel like, I've never really been able to relax in a property because in my head, I've always known, well, at the end of the day, I'm actually not keeping this for myself anyway. So you know that you're going to be moving, and B, you're living on a building site. It's chaos everywhere. And I think if you are living, majority majority of the time, if it's your own home, you're probably going to be living on site whilst you're doing the works. And in that case, I think it's so important to do room by room. And so you've always got a base that's not being worked on. So you can go home and you can shut yourself off and you have a peace and quiet space where no work is going on, and it's your little kind of corner of peace, really.
But it's also little things, isn't it? Because like if you've got builders on site all the time, there's a part of you that when you're at home, you just want to walk around in your pajamas. You get out the bath, you just want to walk around with just your towel on, your hair in a towel or whatever. And you can't quite do that. It's just not a comfortable space to live in. So you're just probably better off, I don't know, staying with your parents or renting an Airbnb for a bit if you're going to go for the big.
Can do that. And like, I guess the reality is that it's not an option for everyone to have that luxury to go and be able to do that. So if you do find yourself having to live on site, one of my top tips, and we've actually done it at the minute, where if we've got work going on a certain room that's creating a lot of dust, it's creating a lot of mess, and make sure that other rooms that are already finished that doesn't affect those rooms. For example, if you were living in one of those rooms, on Amazon you can buy these zip up door pouches. So
what do you mean?
They're like, you put them round the outside of a door and you just zip them up and down, so it stops all the dust and all of that going into these rooms. Brilliant.
Because I would have just thought, I don't know, we'll just shove some towels along the bottom and just keep the door shut.
No, they're so good. And particularly if you're living in something, it's a great way to just keep all of that out.
That's a really good idea.
Good old.
And I love the whole word of mouth thing. I think is quite an important thing. So my husband fits carpets.
Okay.
And he gets most of his business from word of mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, like he's on the different trade websites and that kind of thing. And he's got quite a big thing on Google where he comes up quite a lot. But most of his work is all word of mouth. As if, such and such did my carpet. He was great. And then telling more people about it.
Exactly.
And that's how you know you're getting a decent person.
Definitely. And I'd always be looking at that's the first thing that I would always be looking for.
Yeah.
Is it a recommendation, word of mouth? Nowadays, it's funny because actually the people that were doing our micro cement, we found them online. And that is a big thing nowadays. And people, do have these amazing Instagram and social media pages, but don't get sucked in by it, I guess, because we all know from doing social media, you're seeing the best bits, aren't you? So I still think it's very important to go and actually look at work. So when we used this micro cement company, we actually asked to go and have a look at previous work that they had done. And they invited us. You could have gone to someone's house and had a look at it. And I'm going to say that to them. If you want to use our home for other clients, just give me a call and they can always come and see it, because I think it's so useful to be able to see these things actually done in people's homes compared to being sent a A4 size bit of micro cement, because you don't really know what that's going to look like.
I'm sure that's going to look fine.
Good, sure. So true, so true. I was going to go back to other things that people like surprises, hidden surprises that you often find when you're renovating, because I've mentioned all of the things earlier, but one story that we've had on this recent renovation was the cost of a tower to get windows upstairs. So something that I hadn't budgeted for, the cost of skips could be so expensive. I mean, we've probably had over the last we've been doing this for 15 weeks, probably a skip load a week. So 15 skips sat on your drive. To rent those skips is super expensive. And it's thinking of all of these additional things that you haven't actually factored in. So when I mentioned about this tower, that was to get the windows upstairs into our property. And there were two contractors that came to install these windows. And they said, there's no way we're going to be able to get those upstairs. We're going to need to put up a tower. Well, we didn't have a tower on site, so we'd need to go and rent one. And it was like £200 for 4 days, I think it was, which it doesn't sound loads, but actually if I'm like, oh God, they're going to need this for quite a few days, it's little things like that you're suddenly like, oh my goodness. So we just had a team on site and we were like, I reckon with 5 of us, we can get these windows upstairs. So we did that.
Because I'm trying to pick, because you say tower, I've got absolutely no idea.
Scaffolding tower, but not actual scaffolding. So they would build it, and it's a way of getting stuff without having to try and get it through loads of different.
But picturing like a scissor lift.
Oh no, that would be fun.
That's what I was
like a cherry picker.
Yeah. Do you want to hear a fun story about how we
love to hear a fun story?
We got a bit creative. So my parents were getting their carpets redone. Obviously, my husband's carpet fitter, so he was
who they're going to pick.
So we ripped up their previous carpet. And it turns out there was really beautiful tiles underneath, but they were slightly damaged or whatever. So the carpet was always going to go back over the top. So what we decided to do before the carpet went over the top is we got my dad to lay on the floor. We drew around him like there'd been a murder. We created a murder scene and we drew it all underneath. And then we've laid the carpet on top. So whoever buys the house next, I mean, my parents will probably live there forever. But whoever buys the house next, they're going to rip up the carpet and see him. Because there was a guy, I remember seeing online, I think it was in the papers or something, there was a guy that was doing up his garden and he decided to get a fake skeleton and put it underneath like the cladding or whatever he had going on outside. So then whoever digs up the garden next will find
that. Well, that was, do you know what? With one of my developments, this was always a big fear. I was just like, it was on a very old site and my worst fear was digging up a body. Like, I'm not even kidding, because I was like, well, this is going to delay us, isn't it? Massively. Luckily, touch wood, that did not happen on that site. But do you know what we did find on that site when we knocked it down? A bomb.
Whoa!
Yeah, we found a bomb in the roof of our house that was sat in a water tank above where we slept, and it had been there for, well, all the time we'd lived there. It was from 1961.
Oh my God!
Yeah, and my builder texted me and was like, just literally sent a picture of it was a hand grenade. I didn't realise what it was. I thought it was a bottle of perfume. So I've never seen a hand grenade before. So I was like,
also assumed
okay, cool. Yeah. And I was like, question mark. And he was like, we found a bomb. What do we do? And I was like, I don't know what we do. So I Googled what to do if you find a bomb in your house. And it said you need to call the police. And I was like, okay. So I went straight down to site because I thought, right, I better get down there and make sure like everyone's safe and secure. My boyfriend's there taking a selfie with the bomb. So I was like, can we put the bomb down? Called the police.
Put the bomb down.
And they called the police. They came and evacuated our whole street and did a controlled explosion on the bomb. And I kind of thought, actually, if you'd let that go off, it could have demolished the house for me and done my job.
That's amazing.
Yeah, mad. The things
That's a good story.
But then what I'd also done, which was a funny addition, was I texted this picture and put, we found a bomb so many times on WhatsApp that I got blocked on WhatsApp. So that caused a lot of chaos. Like I said, always the things, and it delayed us by 2 days knocking down, like demolishing this building.
That's crazy. Yeah, do you know what? I would, if you're listening to this or if you're watching this right now, I would love to know if you've been renovating a house and you found some random things in the walls. Can you beat a murder scene, a fake skeleton, or a bomb? Because that's insane. Right, before we wrap up, go on then. Let's go for some last little tips and advice that you've got for renovating your house, if you've got anything else.
Absolutely. I think having a clear budget before you start and having a clear plan before you start, because I think they are two key elements when you are doing a renovation. Like I guess the example that I gave was that we didn't necessarily have a great plan to start with, like a very set out plan, and things have constantly changed. But if you do go into something with a really detailed plan of what you want and where you want it, because I tend to make stuff up as I go, which is my personality, and it works for me. But would I advise other people to do it? Maybe not.
Solid advice.
And having that budget and really sticking to it, because I do think it's so easy to be able to go over budget very quickly. And thinking about those compromises, we downgraded our kitchen slightly because we were just like, where can we save some money? And it's thinking about what the compromise again, my favorite word. What do you definitely need? What can you cut back on?
Nice, good advice. And you know what? If you don't go over budget, you can go on holiday. So then it's a win, isn't it?
I love that. That's people's favourite question in the summer. Where are you going on a holiday this year? I'm like, I'm not. My holiday is my new kitchen, my new flooring, and my new bathroom.
Nice.
That's where you'll find me.
Good luck with your renovation.
Thank you.
And we've got loads more coming up here on Move RQ, so don't go anywhere. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.